Late night outside St. Helena Hospital. Nurse Avery Brooks clocked out her exhaustion, mirroring her cheap worn jacket. A colleague snickered dismissively. Just a mediocre nurse. As always, Avery pulled her jacket tighter, accustomed to the contempt that masked her true identity. Suddenly the silence was shattered as a thunderous A-60 Black Hawk helicopter slammed down before the emergency entrance. Special Forces soldiers jumped out focused and deadly. One shouted urgently, "We are looking for Lieutenant Commander Avery Brooks." Now the tired nurse stood frozen. That was her forgotten rank. In the name of a hero she had tried to bury. Avery Brooks was 29. An emergency room nurse with a gentle, soft-spoken demeanor. She deliberately kept a low profile, always standing back from the spotlight. This quietness was misinterpreted as weakness or inexperience by her colleagues. WHO craved drama and recognition. Her history was a ghost she tried to outrun. She had been a US Navy combat medic, serving as the indispensable medical expert for a high-tier support unit known as Raven 7. Her confidence was legendary. Her decisions split-second and flawless. But the legend ended in a disastrous, high-profile extraction mission in Kandahar. 2 years prior, Avery managed to save her commanding officer, Captain Hale, but a bureaucratic blunder, a failure to authorize critical air support due to a delayed code clearance, resulted in the loss of 3 of her closest teammates. That loss, that systemic betrayal, broke her. She carried deep psychological scars, the kind that don't show on the surface, which fueled her desire for a calm, predictable civilian life. She saw the military system as tragically flawed, a machine designed to save itself, not its people. She requested an honorable discharge, sought the anonymity of a major metropolitan hospital, and deliberately falsified her civilian file to read only registered nurse trainee. This understatement was her shield, meant to keep her far from high-stakes decision-making and the risk of catastrophic failure. The deception worked too well. Her colleagues, led by the arrogant chief resident Dr. Miles, habitually dismissed her. "The new nurse knows nothing about high-stakes trauma," they would snicker, "or she's always so quiet." Zero initiative. You need loud confidence in the not silent study. They valued visible swagger over quiet, relentless preparation. Yet Avery's actions consistently contradicted their scorn. She was always the first to comfort a crying child. Patient the one WHO patiently cleaned and dressed. The neglected wounds of an elderly, difficult patient. She had an uncanny ability to spot distress before the monitors did, a skill honed by years of reading nonverbal cues in combat zones. One evening Dr. Miles criticized her slow processing time during a routine check. Moments later that patient went into a severe, rapidly progressing anaphylactic shock, while Dr. Miles fumbled with his prescription pad, paralyzed by the sudden shift. Avery calmly grabbed the epinephrine pen, confirmed the dosage, delivered the shot in the correct quadrant, and managed the airway, all within the critical 60-second window. She saved the patient, but the reaction was chilling. "Lucky guess, Brooks, you got extremely lucky. But next time you wait for a physician's explicit order." Miles snapped his face, contorted by suppressed panic and envy. She didn't argue, she simply whispered, "I apologize, doctor," which only reinforced their belief that she was meek and easily intimidated. She continued her quiet ritual. Every night Avery lingered in the staff lounge, pulling a worn canvas backpack onto her lap. Inside she kept military field manuals, specifically documents on advanced combat trauma, austere surgery techniques, and high-pressure wound management. She studied them not to practice for the air, but to maintain the quiet, razor-sharp edge that civilian life threatened to dull. She knew that edge was the only thing that kept the nightmares away. The day's shift had been pure bedlam. 3 high-impact vehicle accident victims arrived simultaneously. Dr. Miles, overwhelmed and screaming orders that conflicted with one another, created a paralyzing chaos. "Brooks, stand aside. You're just getting in the way," he bellowed when he saw her approaching a victim. WHO was rapidly losing color. But as the physician team frantically tried to intubate incorrectly, Avery smoothly intervened. With a gentle but firm motion, she secured the necessary instruments and performed a textbook emergency cricothyrotomy, a complex high-risk procedure to open the airway. The patient's oxygen levels immediately stabilized. No one offered praise. The consensus was she got lucky again. She must have studied that specific technique last night, but she still failed to follow the proper patient identification protocol. The procedure had saved a life, but the paperwork was wrong, and for St. Helena, bureaucracy always superseded blood pressure. The department calmed down Avery, exhausted but meticulous. Stayed late to clean the trauma bay herself. Mopping up blood. Changing linens. And wiping down every single surgical instrument. She treated the room as if it were a sterile, clean operating theater in a war zone. Every detail mattered. Because every detail was a potential failure point. Outside the rain began to fall. Cold and heavy. Mirroring the weight of the military past. She desperately tried to suppress. As she prepared to leave, she quietly retrieved a small, faded item from her locker. It was a worn fabric patch. It read, "US Navy Combat Medical Response." She tucked it into her pocket, needing the solid physical presence of the relic. The patch was the last remaining tangible link to her three dearest teammates. WHO had died on the Kandahar mission. She carried it as a quiet promise. I will never fail to act. And I will never let a protocol kill a patient again. The instant Avery stepped out of the hospital doors, the harsh white glare from the Black Hawk spotlight hit her directly. Dust, water and debris flew everywhere. Pedestrians screamed, scattering across the street. And vehicles screeched to a halt. The air was thick with the smell of kerosene and raw military urgency. It was a scene of total military-grade disorder, imposed upon a quiet, civilian night. A special operations officer, built like a brick wall, and radiating immediate authority, bounded out of the helicopter. He was yelling into a tactical headset, his voice raw with urgency. Has anyone seen Lieutenant Commander Avery Brooks? Answer me, this is a medical emergency. We have no time. The hospital's security guard, a man named Ted. WHO had often seen Avery cleaning up late. Pointed a trembling finger at the small figure standing in the doorway. That's her. She just finished her shift, but she's just a nurse. A new one. The entire SEAL team, a group of silent, intense operators, instantly turned their attention to Avery. Their eyes swept over her exhausted face, her cheap jacket and her worn shoes. Then the collective shift happened. Their guarded, professional intensity instantly dissolved into profound, almost ceremonial respect. This wasn't a search, it was a recovery. The lead officer, a man named Miller, strode purposefully toward her, stopping 3 feet away, clicking his heels together in a perfect, rigid attention. Martine needs you. We have a code 0 critical casualty. Avery stepped backward, her civilian facade cracking. Confusion and panic wore in her eyes. So you have the wrong person. I'm just Avery Brooks, I'm a nurse here. We are not mistaken, Lieutenant Commander. Captain Mason Hale is dying. And he specifically requested you. The name was a thunderclap. Mason, the captain. The man WHO had been her commanding officer. The one WHO had survived the blast in Kandahar. The one WHO had physically pulled her out of the flaming wreckage and forced her to seek help. He was the only one WHO knew the full, terrible extent of her training and the pain she carried. He was now staking his life on her competence. The officer, seeing her distress, continued urgently, lowering his voice to cut through the rotor wash. He sustained massive internal trauma from an eyed blast. His pressure is plummeting. The base physician cannot locate the bleed source. It's too complex. It's a crush injury to the thoracic wall, coupled with a specific, deep laceration to the intercostal artery. The injury profile is unique. But why me? She pleaded. The fear of returning to that life clutching at her. You have military surgeons. They have better equipment. Because the SEAL replied, his voice dropping to a desperate low. He said 2 things. First, she thinks faster than a scalpel, and second, only she knows where my other scar is. He says the new trauma is adjacent to an old wound. Only you touched. The one near the 5th rib lateral margin. He said it needs the Brooks touch. Avery felt a cold dread wash over her. It was true. Years ago, under heavy fire, she had performed an emergency thoracic patch on Hale. A procedure so precise and unconventional that only she would know the exact anatomical coordinates of the compromised tissue and its current structural weakness. Mason was counting on her unique dangerous knowledge to navigate the impossible complication. The Black Hawk's rotor wash roared, impatient for her departure. The pilot flashed the external lights. The universal signal for time is up. Then from the emergency room entrance, Dr. Miles and 2 other nurses appeared, drawn by the commotion and the lights. Dr. Miles saw the entire scene. The soldiers, the helicopter, the spotlight. And his jaw dropped. But his arrogance immediately resurfaced. He saw a chance to assert his fading authority. He shouted over the blades. Soldiers, you have the wrong woman. She's a mediocre civilian nurse, you need a real doctor. Her certification is limited. This institution disavows any claims of her surgical ability. The lead SEAL Miller spun around with controlled fury. His uniform was spotless, his presence dominating. And his face was a mask of cold contempt. He didn't shout. He projected his voice with the sharp, unquestionable authority of a combat veteran. He was a perfect, deadly opposite to Dr. Miles's bluster. Dr. Miller stated the title dripping with scorn. This woman, Lieutenant Commander Brooks, is responsible for pioneering the current Navy triage protocol, used by every special operations team worldwide. She saved an entire Raven 7 detachment in a full-scale ambush, while simultaneously evacuating casualties. She operates outside your certification, because her skill transcends your entire institution. Now which one of you has the audacity to stand in the way of a priority 1 medical extraction, requested by a decorated captain? The hospital staff froze, utterly silenced. Dr. Miles, his face ash gray, swallowed his words. The truth, the real rank, the real history, the real competence, had been laid bare by a soldier. WHO treated Avery as nobility. Avery looked at the helicopter, then at the hospital, where her competence had been mocked. She looked at her trembling hands, the hands that had shaken in Kandahar. She had run from this life once, but Mason hadn't run from her. She took one deep, ragged breath, the civilian panic finally yielding to the cold, professional calm she had cultivated in the desert. "All right," she stated, her voice suddenly strong and resolute, the years of meekness melting away. "Get me on the comms. I need a clean feed of his vitals. And I need to know the atmospheric pressure at the insertion point. I'm coming." She gave a quick final tug to the patch in her pocket, a silent commitment to her lost team. "I won't leave anyone behind again." The Black Hawk executed an aggressive vertical climb, the violence of the ascent confirming the gravity of the mission. Pinned back in her seat, Avery's mind was already at the forward operating base. FOB Miller, the lead SEAL, handed her a field surgical headlamp. 14 minutes to the FOB. The mission is called Operation Red Hand. We are severely undermanned and under-equipped. Hale is the linchpin. Avery didn't return the sentiment. She was inside the zone, inspecting the field surgical pack, with the hyper-focus of a diamond cutter. Her movements were economical, fast and flawlessly accurate. She was no longer Avery Brooks, the meeker nurse. She was Lieutenant Commander Avery Brooks, the combat medic, and she was assessing the weaknesses in her own kit. "I need a high-flow fluid warming system. If you don't have one, I need 2 medics on standby to manually pump warm saline. I'll need a chest retractor, not a civilian version, but a compact military-grade one. Give me a clean surface, and keep the rotor wash minimal for 5 feet around the triage zone." Miller, now fully respectful, relayed the precise orders to the pilot in the base. He watched her, recognizing the focus of someone WHO could perform complex surgery, based entirely on memory and touch. The Black Hawk landed not with a soft set down, but a hard, fast, controlled crash into the temporary desert landing zone. The air was thick, with the acrid smell of burnt earth and jet fuel. Smoke billowed from a recent nearby mortar impact site. Over 20 heavily armored SEALs rushed to meet them, their faces etched with desperation. "She's here, Brooks is here, clear the zone now." Avery stepped down. Immediately the soldiers parted, forming an immaculate, respectful pathway, a spontaneous gesture reserved for high-ranking, revered officers or indispensable assets. Mason Hale lay on a metal stretcher, strapped down, his face a ghostly white, his breath shallow and sporadic. His eyes, though barely open, held a spark of desperate relief. "Avery, I knew you'd think outside the box." "I am the box now, Mason," she said, kneeling, instantly running an assessment pulse and checking the trauma profile. A towering military trauma physician, Major Davies, the base's primary surgeon, rushed forward, his face flushed with professional outrage, in the embarrassment of his own failure to diagnose. "I am the trauma lead, you are civilian personnel. You do not have the clearance to operate." Avery didn't even look at him. Her hands were already on Mason's chest, applying precisely calibrated pressure, her voice ice cold and utterly decisive. Cut through the Major's bluster. "Major, I was specifically requested. He has compromised the 5th rib lateral margin. The internal hemorrhage is occult, adjacent to a fibrous tear. If you attempt a traditional surgical opening, you will cause uncontrollable systemic exsanguination. You lack the necessary intel. Stay back." The Major and the surrounding personnel froze. The specificity of her knowledge, the exact location and complication, was an impossible detail for an outsider to know. She was reading his body like a map she had personally drawn. Avery started working. It was a ballet of emergency medicine, identifying the exact point of the occult, bleeding using only palpation, instructing the base medics where to apply localized pressure, preparing the thoracotomy setup, and controlling the hemorrhage. using an advanced technique she had personally developed in the field. A procedure designed to repair complex trauma with minimal tissue disruption. Every movement was economical. Every order was crisp. A seasoned SEAL medic, watching her work with a high flow for muttered, "She's faster than any trauma surgeon I've ever seen. Look at her control. She's anticipating 2 steps ahead." In a terrifying, concentrated 7 minutes and 40 seconds, Mason's vitals stabilized. His breathing deepened, and his pulse returned to a manageable rate. She had pulled him back from the precipice, not with luck or heavy machinery, but with sheer surgical competence. He was safe for immediate transport. Just as Avery finished securing the dressing, a colonel, the FAB commander, a man named Reynolds, WHO had been observing the entire scene, approached her. His expression was a mixture of profound relief and dawning recognition. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks," he said, his voice rough with emotion, his posture instantly straightening. "I know you. I was the communications officer on the command post during the Kandahar incident. I saw the aftermath. You are the sole survivor of Rescue 9. We were told your team was lost entirely." A silence descended on the field. Rescue 9. The unit whose demise was classified. The one Avery had tried to bury. The one the Navy had written off. Avery stood up, her face streaked with blood and sweat. She looked the colonel directly in the eye, her gaze holding all the pain and pride of her past. "I only do what I must, sir." The colonel, overcome by the sheer weight of her past sacrifice and present confidence, turned to the dozens of soldiers gathered. His voice, trained to command, rang out across the base. "All Navy SEALs and combat support, attention. Present arms and salute Lieutenant Commander Brooks. This is the standard of care we live and die by." Dozens of elite soldiers snapped into a perfect, simultaneous salute. The sound of their boots clicking together was a sound of profound reverence, acknowledging the undeniable authority of skill. Over rank Avery's eyes welled up, not with pride, but with the heavy sorrow of being recognized for a life she had paid dearly to leave behind. She returned the salute with a perfect military precision she hadn't needed in 2 years. The vindication was absolute, and witnessed by the highest military personnel present. If you believe that true valor is found in quiet sacrifice, comment honor. The news reached St. Helena Hospital within an hour. The incident was too spectacular, the Black Hawk too audacious, and the sight of a SEAL team publicly saluting a civilian nurse too viral to be contained. The staff lounge was buzzing with horrified whispers. "Lieutenant Commander, she's a middle-rank naval officer. She was the sole survivor of a classified team, and we told her to clean the floors." The collective realization of how profoundly they had misjudged her, how they had confused her quiet efficiency with incompetence, was a crushing blow to the hospital's carefully manicured corporate ego. The hospital director was left utterly speechless, locked in his office, frantically reviewing the internal disciplinary report signed by Dr. Miles. He watched a news report showing Colonel Reynolds publicly thanking a decorated combat medic and criticizing the civilian bureaucracy that nearly allowed one of our greatest assets to be discarded. The man he had allowed Dr. Miles to humiliate was now the epicenter of a national incident. The following day the truth was formalized. The Black Hawk returned, this time landing on the hospital's designated, secured helipad. The roar was less frantic, but the purpose was absolute. SEAL team members led by Captain Hale, now mobile and stable, marched into the main lobby. They were not there for treatment. They were there for respect. In a public, undeniable statement. "Where is Lieutenant Commander Brooks?" Hale demanded, his voice firm, projecting the authority of a recovered man and a senior officer. "We are here to thank her formally, and to ensure this institution understands the error of its judgment." The staff members WHO had mocked her, including Dr. Miles. WHO was now hiding in a supply closet, were forced to witness the scene. They shuffled their feet, looking down in shame. Last night they had called her a mediocre nurse. When Avery finally returned to the hospital to finalize her exit paperwork, she walked through the main doors in a simple civilian outfit. The moment she appeared, Captain Hale and the entire SEAL team snapped to attention, executing a crisp, flawless salute right there in the civilian lobby. The public and the assembled media snapped pictures. Avery flushed, overwhelmed by the public display of deep military respect. A young resident physician, Dr. Evans, WHO had quietly admired her, stepped forward, his eyes genuinely tearful. He bowed his head deeply. "I speak for the good people here. I apologize for our blindness. We mistook your quiet professionalism for inexperience, and let our ego drive policy." Avery looked at him, her eyes soft, conveying no bitterness. "Your apology is accepted, doctor. But please don't apologize to me. Just stop mistaking arrogance for confidence. Never dismiss a patient's silent need. Because it doesn't fit your preferred protocol. The greatest risk is always hesitation." She didn't stay long. She signed her exit papers and left the hospital. For the last time. As she walked back out, the SEAL team formed a silent, disciplined honor guard, escorting her to the military vehicle. The hospital staff watched, realizing they hadn't just lost a nurse. They had publicly betrayed a hero. The shame was palpable. And the lesson, that true value often resides in humility, was finally learned. The hospital immediately announced a full policy review, promising to prioritize clinical confidence over bureaucratic compliance. The community had been woken up by the cold sound of a helicopter, demanding its hero back. If you believe that kindness can fundamentally change an entire institution, comment respect. 1 week later, a formal invitation arrived from the Department of the Navy, bypassing all normal bureaucratic channels. Lieutenant Commander Avery Brooks is invited to return to service, with an immediate promotion to commander, to serve as the chief architect and director for advanced field medical doctrine and training. It was a role created for her, a mandate to rewrite the rules she had been forced to break, and the protocols that had cost her teammates. Avery stood on the expansive airport tarmac, back of a major military base, the afternoon sun casting a calm, even light on her face. She was now dressed in her formal Navy uniform, the insignia of commander gleaming, a testament to her years of quiet sacrifice. Mason Hale, now mobile and in recovery, stood waiting near a new gleaming medical Black Hawk. "Welcome home, Commander. Thank you again. You gave me back my life twice." Avery smiled, a genuine, easy smile that had been absent for 2 years. "I just did what I always do, Mason. I refused to leave a man behind." The military command, recognizing her unparalleled expertise, immediately adopted her core philosophy. They overhauled their combat medicine curriculum, focusing on rapid, unconventional trauma solutions. They established a new, highly advanced training program for special operations medics dedicated to making split-second high-risk decisions. The training syllabus was named the Brooks Protocol. Every trainee in the new program knew the story of the woman WHO designed it. The nurse WHO was once deemed mediocre by a civilian hospital, but was the only person trusted by the nation's elite forces. Her mandate was to instill the power of conscious non-compliance when a life was on the line. During her inaugural address to the first class of new SEAL medics, a young recruit, intimidated but respectful, approached her. "What is the most important rule in saving a life? Is it the technique or the training?" Avery looked at the eager young face, her eyes reflecting the wisdom gained from both the air and the battlefield. "It is neither, it is the conviction. Respect the life, not your ego. Confidence is silent, but saving a life is the loudest statement you can make. Never hesitate because of fear of failure. Hesitation is the only true failure." The legacy of St. Helena was that Dr. Miles was swiftly demoted, and the hospital director was forced into early retirement. St. Helena's hospital policy changed dramatically, introducing a new standard called the Avery Protocol for Mass Casualty Events, which prioritized immediate life-saving intervention above documentation. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, bathing the basin's soft golden light, Avery stood at the edge of the tarmac, watching the distant city lights glow. She was no longer running from the past. She was actively shaping the future. She looked up at the sky, towards the place where her 3 teammates had been lost forever. She whispered softly to the wind, a promise fulfilled. "I'm back now, Commander. We teach the lesson now, the dead command the living." The life she had tried to bury became the extraordinary legacy she chose to build. Commander Avery Brooks went from a forgotten nurse to a national hero, not by changing WHO she was, but by forcing the world to acknowledge her true self. She proved that the systems, built on fear and paperwork, will always bow to the absolute necessity of courage and skill. Her return to service wasn't a promotion. It was a vindication, a retrieval of an asset so valuable. The entire United States military had to dispatch a Black Hawk to retrieve her from the wreckage of a broken civilian system.